pleasure of knowing for the last couple of years Chris Hauk and Michaela Mora. For more than 30 years, Chris has honed his research skills across a wide variety of categories, from telecom and IT to consumer packaged goods, hospitality, medical products, and consulting. Undoubtedly influenced by a colorful, exotic upbringing in West Africa, Chris has an almost insatiable desire to explore and stretch his professional range. Chris recently opened a new consultancy on January 1st, 2020, dedicated to experiential marketing research. Research designs are focused on observing consumers behaving in real situations. He's also been on both the client side with GTE and the supplier side with the variety of large and small providers, including a firm he started in 2000. Chris has a BBA and MBA from Texas Christian University in Fort Worth, Texas, and currently lives in Longmont, Colorado. Chris is currently president of his own company dedicated to experiential research, Hawkeye. Michaela has more than 20 years of international hands-on market research experience in consumer-facing industries such as travel, entertainment, offline and online retail, automotive, franchise systems, fast-moving consumer goods, and restaurants. She has conducted more than 400 market studies, which include ad testing and tracking, new product concept testing, market segmentation, and customer satisfaction, as well as A&U, pricing research, copy testing, and user research, including usability testing. Michaela has work experience from both the client side and the supplier side in the U.S. and abroad. Before founding Relevant Insights, she managed the market research team at Blockbuster Online, where her work was instrumental in shaping the design and launch of Blockbuster Total Access and the doubling of its subscriber base from 1.5 million to 3 million in only 9 months. Prior to Blockbuster, Michaela led the research team at Match.com and was responsible for sales forecasting at Proline International, the ethnic hair product division of Alberto Culver. Michaela's agency experience comes from working as a marketing science analyst at Mark Research, as a market research manager at Research International Sweden, and as a media research manager at the Cuban Institute of Radio and Television. Michaela holds an MS in Marketing Research from the University of Texas at Arlington, an MS in Marketing, Advertising, and Public Relations from Stockholm University, and a BS and MS in Psychology from Havana University. She also holds a professional researcher certification at the expert level issued by the Marketing Research Association and is fluent in both English, Spanish, and Swedish. Michaela is a columnist writer for the Dallas Business Journal on market research and customer insights matters of interest to entrepreneurs and small businesses. She has published articles in Quark's Marketing Research Review and MRA's Alert magazine and writes critically acclaimed Relevant Insights articles, blogs about market research and insights topics. Please welcome Chris Hauk and Michaela Mora.
Hello.
Hey there. Thanks.
Can you
Thanks
hear
for the
us?
introduction, guys.
You sure can.
Okay.
Everybody hear us? Okay, good. I'm going to share I'm going to put my presentation or our presentation up on the screen. Let me make sure that I do that right. Can everyone see a beautiful picture?
Yes.
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, good. Thanks. Hey, the first thing I wanted to say before I got started was congratulations to Ben and Travis. Fantastic. Can't think of two guys who deserve that award more than you two. So congratulations, boys. Okay, good. Let's get started. We're going to talk about better, faster, cheaper, which is something we've heard in our industry over and over and over again since I started in the 80s sometime, a long, long time ago. And Michaela, you too, right?
Yes,
I'm
absolutely.
sure you've heard this term over and over and over again. Okay. But what better, faster, cheaper isn't, or what it doesn't mean, is better plus faster equals cheaper. I mean, cheaper plus faster equals better, right? Which we don't hear, people don't say it, but that's really where our industry's been going for the last decade or so. And we're going to talk about that in detail. So I like my team. I put a little team together here of me and Michaela. A little bit about us both. This is just in the presentation. You guys have already heard enough about us. So, and just so you're all clear, because it took her a long time to teach me how to say it correctly, Michaela. Okay? So just practice on your own for a second, and then I'm the other presenter here. I'm the non-graduate of the UTA program. I've been involved with the program for about 20 years now, but as a board member. Good. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the history of our industry. Okay? And Michaela will jump in whenever she feels like it to either straighten me out or make comments or talk through the presentation. Some of it is hers and some of it is mine, and we'll just make sure that that if she has something to say, she's just going to say it. Okay? Good. Okay, so our noble history. Who are we as an industry? We started this a long time ago. No, that is not me with hair. Simply taking a big map of a neighborhood, blocking out every seventh home or something like that to achieve some sort of randomness in our data collection so that we were as representative as possible. So basically you decided, hey, I'm going to go to, I need 400 completes from this particular neighborhood. I'm going to go to every seventh door to get them, and hopefully that'll achieve my randomness. Okay. Next, we started doing telephone interviewing, and my very first project in marketing research actually was my grad school paper on what do workers do for lunch. And the way I had to collect the data was very manual over a semester. I essentially blocked out the Fort Worth phone book and picked every nth listing and gave them a call and tried to talk to them. And collected 400 completed interviews that way, which is pretty ridiculous if you think about it in today's terms. Finally, later on in my career, we went to random digit dialing, right? So we used a dialer to do the work, but it was as random as we could possibly be at that point in time. And remember, each of these methods has inherent flaws in the process. There's a flaw at every step of the way, but there it is. Michaela, where'd you start out in this curriculum? Given your
yes,
given the introduction, I would think that you probably started at door to door too.
Yes, I mean, I was living in a parallel world in Cuba, and so my first job was as a media researcher at the Cuban Institute of Radio and Television. This was before computers in the 80s, and in a country with a shaky telephone network. So all research was done in person, very much door to door. And for efficiency purposes, we would go to schools and workplaces too. I did a lot of that to study telenovelas. And so we didn't have focus group facilities. We had to wait for the show to broadcast live and run the next day and ask schools and workplaces to let us do focus groups. And for surveys, we would ask the questions and write the answers by hand. So we were a little behind than you when you were already doing the phone book. But yes, it has a similar history.
Yeah, she's being kind and reminding all of us that she's younger than I am, so. Which is fine. So hey, the way I always say this is we don't need no stinking rules, right? Research has gotten to the point where we're getting faster and cheaper, and part of that is that we're just tossing out some important rules. And we'll talk a little bit about those in a second. But really, the question is, do we need these rules? Do we need rules to keep us in line? Or is just data, and we just collect whatever we want, whenever we want, however we want, and that's totally fine. To be honest, I've found over the years that in order to achieve faster and cheaper, the thing that tends to go is the set of rules that keep us in line. And in letting those rules go, we aren't making our product better. So I don't know if any of you heard any of that, but basically it's the opening scene one of the opening scenes in the movie Jerry Maguire, where essentially he has given out all of this, he's done all this work overnight, and it essentially realizes that, oh my God, this might be a big stinking deal. I might have screwed up my life just doing all this work. So what he realizes is that there are rules in place, and those rules are to protect us, are to keep us safe from ourselves, all right, from society. Those rules are really basic, and they're the things that Dr. Grisafi probably talked to you about in the first day of your statistics classes, for those of you who were lucky enough to learn statistics from Dr. Grisafi. And my guess is that you talked a little bit about bias and what bias means, right? It's the tendency of a measurement process to over or underestimate the value of a population parameter, right? It's a tendency of the work to either assume that it's too positive or too negative, okay? It's a mistake, basically. And a statistical error, which is that how often this happens, right? The larger the error, the lower the accuracy. And so Michela is probably better at explaining these things than I am. I just inherently understand them. But those are the rules that apply to us in marketing research.
Yes, I just want to emphasize that this particular set of rules you are mentioning are essential to good data quality and to support objectivity and representation. Here is it's important to have a clear understanding of the distinction between variance and bias. Sometimes our questions are ambiguous. Sometimes people may overshoot or undershoot in their answers, and all that causes variation or variance. So when we do surveys, the statistical measures can have large standard errors, which means that really good design of questionnaire is important. Variance is more about precision than bias, which is why also large samples tend to reduce variance. Bias, on the other hand, is about asking questions that everybody gets wrong in the same direction. So a typical example of this is leading questions. So again, good questionnaire design is key to minimize both variance and bias. Unfortunately, in many do-it-yourself teams, that wave that have come in the last 20 years, don't always have the training to write good questions and surveys or discussion guides in focus groups or IDIs, which leads to a break in rules that helps ensure data quality. Then there is also most likely lack of diversity in the insights team. We know that Blacks, Hispanics, and other racial groups are underrepresented in our industry, and so that will limit the ability to write good questions to reflect diversity of opinions, cultural norms, behaviors that leads to systematic bias. I am part of the Multicultural Insights Collective, which is a coalition of diverse group of researchers and agencies and research centers. And we did a study last year in the middle of the pandemic showing that how various groups perceive different social causes and how they related to different hashtags in social media after the murder of George Floyd. And we were able to cast a wider net to provide a more accurate representation of different groups, just because how diverse our group is in age and race and ethnicity and gender and expertise in different areas of research. I think we would have missed a great deal, if we didn't have so much diversity in our group.
One of the things that we pay a particular amount of attention to in doing marketing research properly is the sample, right? So, and this is a place where mistakes often happen. A couple of things to pay attention to in your sample is the quality of it. How representative is it? And this is a great picture for this to explain this concept, because basically this is a street in Tokyo, and the only person who's in focus is the only tourist, the only white tourist who is on this street at this crosswalk at this point. The point being that yes, she is representative of the people that are in this crosswalk in Tokyo. The real point is that she is not representative of anybody else around her, nor of anybody who actually lives there. So the quality of it is how representative is that sample. And then again, you need enough sample in order to be able to feel confident in your results, right? That your result represents the population of interest, of particular interest. So how many of these people do you have to have in your sample in order to feel confident that that sample is accurate? So I started about 20 years ago. I started to notice a couple of interesting and very scary things happening in our industry. Thought that something was very, very wrong. One of them is, and Michelle has already kind of described it, is what I call the do-it-yourself dilemma, which, I want to make it clear that I'm not anti-do-it-yourself. In fact, not at all. The thing I am concerned about in doing it yourself is how easy it is to break rules out of convenience or cost or whatever it might be. Okay. So this is what I call the do-it-yourself dilemma. And it happened a few years ago to me. Person's a really good friend of mine, so I never use her name. And if she's on here, she may know that it's her. She may not, because this has happened to me more than once, actually a multitude of times. So I always get talking to somebody who's recently gotten Qualtrics and starts really programming using it, right? Using it a lot. And for their on their client-side business. And the thing that I hear from them, they proudly tell me that, oh yeah, I met with my client, I wrote the objectives of the study, I wrote the questionnaire in the programming platform directly, so I didn't write it on paper first and then put it in the programming. I just wrote it straight into the programming platform. I used a sample of our customers, I analyzed the data myself, I made my recommendations, and I presented them to the client. Which is all great, and it's faster and cheaper than doing it with me. I no doubt about it. Right, Michela?
Absolutely.
There's no doubt about it that it would be cheaper to do it this way than to do it with you or to do it with me or to do it with anybody else. Okay, so what I heard what I also heard was that I didn't check our thinking with somebody objective, review the objectives for common sense, proof the questionnaire, proof the programming, expose our ideas to target markets not on our list, so my sample's not representative, check the data for accuracy, check the report for accuracy or common sense, review the recommendations for common sense. There's no outside perspective. There's no outside view to any of this. And that's really concerning, but it's a very, very common thing in marketing research today because so much of it is done on the fast and cheap. So when Dr. Grisafi was using his example for the airline industry, I found that really interesting because I used to travel up until a year ago. I used to travel a lot, and I got a lot of surveys from the airlines, the car rental companies, the hotels, all those guys. And they're really, really good at sending out very, very fast surveys about your experience. At Hertz in particular, if you are a Hertz customer, you will get a survey just to see if you're breathing. And for everything else that happens with Hertz in between, every single thing that happens, you will get a short survey. And they're not long, which is great, but they are incessant. And not a lot of them aren't particularly well thought out. They ask questions that are meaningless. Really, a big part of it is to get the NPS score component and to follow up on it, which in some ways is really good thinking. I want to stay in touch with my customer. In some ways, it doesn't give themselves the empathy of the customer themselves. So it doesn't really feel like, what's this like for the customer to be receiving 20, 30, 40 surveys a month from me. The other thing that I heard at a conference, so you'll see that you'll remember, some of you, that this is what our conference used to look like, right? And one of the things I heard in 2012 that I keep coming back to was a speaker that I curated, that I found, he'd been at Hallmark for his entire career. He's retired now. Very, very nice guy. But one of the things he had said in 2012 was that we've abandoned probability sampling as a requirement of our research. And when he said it, I'm probably standing back here in the back of the room somewhere, and I think my jaw hit the ground, and I had to pull it back up because basically that is a huge component of what we do as an industry. That's a big part of being able to say that our research represents a larger population. And so when he said it, I was like, oh my God, that's going to change that's a big change in our industry. And it already started happening. It wasn't just his company, but it was many, many others who had gone to just surveying their own customer base because that was easy. It was fast. It's convenient. It's a convenient sample. So my first thought was, what are we thinking? We've removed two powerful guardrails to doing research better. Two guardrails were objectivity and representativity. Michelle, I had to correct my English spelling on this one. I always leave out the ta. I have no idea why, because I can't spell. But the point is, in the process of going faster and cheaper, we've eliminated two very important guardrails to rules to doing things right. That's being objective, maintaining an objectivity, which a lot of people say, oh, I know I work for the company, but I can still do that. The issue with that example that I gave isn't the fact that you can't remain objective, which nobody can. Even I can't. I'm fanboy, right? Like for the last year or so, my biggest client has been a company, and they know, they tell me I can talk about them, so it's fine. For all the consultants out there freaking out, but the company is called When We All Vote, and they're basically a nonprofit that gets out the vote among young people for the most part. And the leader of that organization is Michelle Obama. And I'm sorry, but and I know I'm ultra liberal here, but I am a huge fan. So it's very hard for me to be completely unbiased when I talk about her projects or her needs or what we're doing for her. But I still try, and there are other people in the room helping me maintain that objectivity. And then representativity as well, right? Regarding the sample. So we're making research faster and cheaper, but not better. It isn't just one thing, right? It's lots of little things. It's the slow degradation of our industry. Oh, I didn't mean to do that. But basically, it's little pieces over a 20-year period, right? It's happening bit by bit, little piece by little piece. It isn't just one thing, one person, one rule, one of us. No one is bad, mean, evil, or clueless, right? Not at all. Okay. All right, there we go. We'll just let it happen over a long period of time. Not out of meanness, but out of convenience, expediency, budget constraints, desire to do good, need to pay the bills, need to make some money. Whatever it is, we've let the quality of our industry degrade significantly to achieve a faster and cheaper product. We always get these questions. I'm going to tease Michelle because we both talk about these all the time.
Yep.
What can we do in 3 days? What can we do for $3,000? So what can you do, Michelle, that Chris Hauck won't do? And she's like, nothing. There's nothing I would do that you wouldn't do. From a cost, cheap and fast standpoint, we get this all the time. Is that right?
Yes, we can do some things. The question is how useful they are, how actionable they are, how really are we misguiding you, or just give you something so you can feel, good that you did something. But it really, we all have seen a lot of bad do yourself research. Was called by a client that she came new to a company. The company they had a team there. They were doing a lot of conjoint analysis, cheaply, faster. And it was they have adopted their own internal approach, and it was yielded results that didn't match the actual market data. And so the client asked me to evaluate what the team was doing. And I found what the problem was. I proposed a fix, but it meant it's going to be inconsistent with prior research, and the team was really junior and didn't use vendors because of budget constraint. constraints. And when you don't have experience in our field, you get quickly swept away by the faster, cheaper, better mantra, particularly from technology providers in our industry, which are whatever they are promising. So the company had invested in tools, but they have not invested in knowledge. So they were producing a lot of bad research. And the problem was that my feedback would expose the team. It would create a big backlash against the insights team. And so they doubled down on using the same approach until the differences were so big that the whole research got discredited. And now there's no trust at all for a whole set of methodologies. So there's no trust at all for conjoint analysis studies, which has its merits when appropriate. It's not for everything, but sometimes it's a good method. And now it's being discarded because people using it didn't know, how to use it well.
So I always get this question, is something better than nothing, right? Actually, what I hear is, isn't something better than nothing, right? Not when it comes to data, right? There is a point at which just doing something is exactly the same as doing nothing, right? Let's say we're conducting a test to determine which of 5 concepts are best. We have sample sizes just simply too small. We have 100 completes across 5 concepts. It's not enough significant difference between the to determine which of those concepts is the winner. In that case, and in many other cases, this is just one example, but in this case, something is just the same as nothing. In fact, it might even be worse because it gives a false confidence to this group of characters, right? Look at these guys. This is the prettiest board I've ever seen, but they're a very attractive group of board members, but essentially they're the board, and they're sitting here listening to a researcher talking to them about how confident they are that concept A or concept C is the strongest concept and we should go forward with it. And they don't know to ask, well, what was your sample size? How many observations did each respondent have of the concepts? What was your scale? How did you make that decision? What are the merits? What's the design? It's not their job to ask those questions. It is the job of the marketing researcher to provide that information and to know that what they've done is accurate and correct, not just faster and cheaper. So in providing them this false confidence in the data, what we've done essentially is chiseled a little bit of our our credibility away each and every time we do it as an industry. Each and every time we provide mediocre work that we are not confident in, or work that we don't know we shouldn't be confident in, we're reducing our credibility as an industry. So for a long time, the big push was, we need insights to be at the table. Insights needs to be at the table. Well, if insights is at the table, it's got to be because of the work. The work is good, inspiring, and inspires confidence, not because it's faster and cheaper. We're also always pushing to think out of the box. And everybody wants to think out of the box. But I actually like to think of what we do as thinking inside the box. I think we haven't even come close to exploring the inside of the box. And I think of the box actually as the set of rules that keep us from doing crazy, stupid stuff, right? Writing poor design, developing bad ideas. The box is actually that set of rules that keep us from straying from good statistical work. So we're all out there trying to get to Mars, and we've barely explored the ocean bottom. So it's really not about thinking outside the box, but being innovative inside of it. And I want Michela to come and give you an example of one way that she does it, and I'm going to give you a couple of examples of how I've done it over the years. Hey guys, before we start this section, how are we doing on time? Chris, how are we doing on time?
You are good. You have about 20 minutes.
Perfect.
But that's also if there's some Q&A afterwards.
What? They can email us. Okay. Here we go.
Well, by now you probably have heard about the idea of customer journeys, especially in the context of customer experience and UX research. Before customer journey became a popular term, we usually look at this in market research with a more narrow scope as the path to purchase, the marketing funnel. But the convergence of voice of the customer, customer satisfaction research with the interest in the path to purchase has expanded the concept of customer experience into a more comprehensive framework to understand the interactions at the different touch points between the company and customers and potential customers. And so as companies are trying to become more customer centric, the new customer experience function is willing to have a more integrated view of the different triggers that can set a potential customer or repeat customer on a path to purchase. We have come to understand that previous models don't reflect how people are making decisions, and the marketing funnel is really linear from the customer perspective. And I'm talking about awareness, consideration, decision to buy. And the triggers that activate a customer journey can be internal factors in terms of emotional needs, physical needs, habits. It could be external environmental factors, right? It could be the life stage, the socioeconomical status, societal issues, things that we have to consider that are happening all at the same time. Other triggers may originate from actions by the brand, the advertising, the product design, the interactions at the product for sale, at the store, online, product reviews, in general media presence. And then there are factors related to unexpected situations that buyers find themselves. When all those triggers are combined, we often see that buyers can take many paths and steps that can be sometimes sequential, sometimes happen in parallel, sometimes they retract, they go back and go forward as they evaluate different pieces of information, sometimes consciously or unconsciously, and while they are exposed to many different triggers. So in terms of research, instead of just listing a set of sources of awareness and actions that buyers may take without considering the order of those actions to create a consideration set and make purchase decisions, we try to find segments based on the customer journey patterns, which allow us for a more actionable customer segmentation and also potential market opportunities to customize the customer experience at different touch points. Can you go to the next?
Yes, ma'am.
So this usually starts with qualitative research to avoid biases that we may have, the client may have, right? And when budgets are small and deadlines are short, a few IDIs combined with homework tasks are excellent ways to explore the potential path different customer groups might take. We have done what I call path stitching, when we let participants to draw or use sticky notes to represent what they did in a particular scenario, purchase decision. And then we probe around it because we know people don't remember stuff. So we try to go deeper through the IDI, through the process. And unfortunately, some organizations stop there and they create buyer personas. I'm a big proponent of qualitative research, but I'm very aware of its limitations as well. So in this case, we emphasize it's used to create hypotheses about the different segments that need to be validated with quantitative research. We also need quantitative research to determine how big those potential customer segments are and who the customers taking those spots are in order to make investments to decide, how to design the website, how to train customer service reps, how to create products and design product information. And so depending on budget, on skills, and timeline, we can use a simple approach based on, for example, a limited set of concept for different paths that participants can recognize, or we can use more advanced analytics technique like an adaptive conjoint analysis to find different combination of steps and paths that make journeys with high probabilities of being activated. So this approach would allow us to play what-if scenarios and estimate cost and profitability if we decide to invest in certain steps along that customer journey path. And I bring both options to illustrate to the client the trade-offs we all have to make. We always have to sacrifice either time, money, or quality. However, if we are able to find approaches inside the box that really answer business questions, that help decision makers to get their job done with confidence, they are willing to invest time, money to get quality research. We have seen many companies nickeling and diming the $3,000 request to research suppliers, but they sometimes are willing to pay big bucks to consulting agencies like McKinsey or Accenture, which they also use research, but they don't talk about it. They focus on what the clients will do based on the research. And quality research requires a certain level of expertise, which could be sourced through hired, trained researchers and partnering with research vendors with expertise. So we are trying to find ways within the box to help with actions. We always talk about actionable research, but I think our industry have a hard time to put it in action, really, to put it in place. So the decision makers, those on the boardroom, really see how this is really guiding. We have been for many years just staying there and say, well, this is the data, this is a methodology, but don't go the extra step of proposing a strategy and proposing ways of implementing the research. That's what we need to do to be able to break and justify the need for investing in time and money in research.
Thanks, Michelle. I always think of myself as an open source researcher. So any technique or tool that I develop, I tend to like to share. Oddly enough, I don't make it a product and own it. I actually share with other researchers if they call and they ask me about it. One of the things I had to develop about 10 years ago was an alternative to MaxDiff. Whatever it was, the situation that I was facing didn't allow me to do MaxDiff. And 10 years ago, that was, oh my God, I can't do MaxDiff. What do I do now? So I came up with a little workaround that I found works extremely well in some cases, in most cases, actually, many cases. But it's based on what I learned from a group called Eric Martyr Associates. Actually, my account executive there in the 90s, I guess, was Andrea Thompson, who is brilliant woman. She's been at our conference a few times. I don't know if she's on now, but if she is, hey, AT. But Andrea taught me about self-explicated, conjoint, and discrete choice, and how Eric Martyr had to design things back in a world before computers where we used to do call studies, and the study required you to recruit somebody, get them into the study, then send them all your choice or conjoint exercise materials. Then they did it on paper, and then you called them back and collected the data and added months to the project. So Eric wanted to get around that, and what he did was essentially break the exercise down into smaller, more manageable components, which allowed him to collect the same data or very similar data in a very different way, but allowed him to do it over the phone. So that's how he discovered how self-explicated conjoint and discrete choice could work in his environment. So in mine, what I wanted to do was simplify MaxDiff into a different exercise. Essentially what MaxDiff does is sorts and organizes and provides a relative distance between attributes. So I simply set up the exercise that way. It became 2 questions instead of the multiple cards of a MaxDiff exercise, which is sort all these attributes in some way and then score them relative to each other and another. So my quickie MaxDiff approach is actually, this is one for knee replacement surgery study, and basically these are the attributes that help a surgeon decide on which knee to put in, and there's more, and it's more complicated than this, but this is a good way to look at it. So first of all, I have the surgeon sort these attributes in terms of what's important to them, in deciding which knee replacement product to use. And then the second question is score them. Allocate 100 points. Eric Martyr used to do a chip allocation essentially, but it's the same thing. Score this, take this 100 points and allocate them across your ranking, not being able to give one that's lower a higher score. Okay, pretty simple stuff. Sorry, somebody fired up the coffee machine in the kitchen, but it'll only take a minute. Okay, so the point is, there's a way around max diff if you have to. This is a pretty good way. It works for me. If you need help understanding how it works, feel free to email me. I'm happy to share. Okay. The other benefit of this is that I get individual level data for all the attributes, which my statistician, if he's on, Tim Herlick, will tell you is always a good thing. I'm not sure if MaxDiff does it or not. I can't remember. Doesn't matter. I haven't used MaxDiff in a long time. So the other tool that I have developed over the years that I really like, I've developed many, but these are two as an example of out-of-the-box thinking. Another one I've developed, and I'm happy to share how we did it, how I do it, is what I call deep experience ethnography. It's really the basis of why I started my company in the first place, is that I wanted to go observe people doing real things. So deep experience ethnography for me is not about not letting the respondent know what's going on, but having the environment not know what's going on, and the respondent is actually in on the game. So the respondent knows that we're doing research and we're watching them and we're asking them how they're feeling about things and what their experience is like, so they become a judge in their courtroom drama. Basically, but everybody else doesn't know. So waiters and waitresses and restaurant staff and hotel staff and whoever has no clue that we're doing research. And these are the tools. So the tools are really basic, right? So I use an iWatch as our monitor. We use Apple AirPods as our microphone, and we use an iPhone as the camera, right? So we black out. Actually, it's kind of deceiving because we black out the screen of the iPhone and just use the camera part of it. It's pretty cool. I have a friend who is a videographer who came up with this, doing a project with me for a restaurant chain, where we took people out. The first thing we did was we had a meeting with their group. Say they have a lunch group that they go out to lunch with once a week. We met with that group at their workplace in a conference room. We videotaped the interactions there. We went through the process of, okay, so how do you decide where we're going to lunch today? Who's going to choose? And then we could go anywhere, because we didn't have to get permissions from the restaurant themselves in order to be inside. It was completely disguised. They had no idea we were there. I've done this project for buying light bulbs at a big box store. We've done it for, and others for that particular client, who I think is on today. Hey, Laura, I hope you're here. For a casual dining client that we just talked about. And then I've also done it for something as complex as a blood gas analyzer, which is a machine the size of a room, which I have no idea how it works. So that's not the important part. The important part is that we're able to collect this information from experts by following them around and having them do kind of a stream of consciousness. They'll talk about it. We collect a lot of information that way. All right. So the point of all this is fast plus cheap does not equal better, okay? And anytime you look at a methodology, anytime you're approached with a design or a system or a software or a package or whatever it is, ask yourself the question, does this make better research? And in some cases, absolutely, sure. This tool or technique does bring a better result, makes more sense, helps clarify, is a better approach to whatever you're doing. But in many cases, fast plus cheap does not equal better. Each has got to stand on its own. Faster, cheaper, and better. That's all we have. Any questions? Actually, you know what I'll do is get out of presentation mode here and get the screen. You know, this is going to be clumsy because I am not a pro at doing this. Are you guys still seeing my screen, or are you seeing the whole,
We're seeing you.
You see me? I'm sorry, guys.
Gabriel has a question for you.
Gabriel, what do you got?
Hey, how's it going?
Good, sir.
So I know like the big, new word everybody likes to use is big data, and every company wants to know, big data analytics and different things like that. And I know that's kind of people try to separate the two. They try to separate marketing and research and big data. So in your experiences, how have you merged the two to provide an overall solution for the people you're working for?
I'm absolutely not a big data guy. Not that I'm not a fan. You need big data, absolutely. But my little piece of the world is primary marketing research. So if you have your big data guys look at the data, their data, which is all, so there's two things to think of in terms of big data. You're not looking forward, right, because you didn't ask any primary questions. You're basically looking at your metadata for your business, right? What did this person buy? How much did they spend? When did they do it? Where did they buy it? Et cetera, right? The stuff that you have, basically big data is the stuff that you have in your big computer at work that is generated from your business. And then you can look at that data. That's awesome. You should absolutely do that. People should do that, right? But it's not what I do. And if the big data guys came back and say, hey, we're seeing this trend where people are starting to buy at Target, right? Or they're buying in this price point at Target, or they're doing this, or they're doing that. They might come and say, smart Target, say, who are very smart people, might come back and say, yeah, the big data guys say this. Let's do some primary research to see how we can take advantage of that situation. That's kind of the line for me. And the two should work really closely hand in hand, right? But I don't go into their lane, and they might come into my lane, but I'm cool with it. They can be in my lane, but I really don't do big data, but I support the fact that it's done, right? It's just another tool in the toolbox. A good tool as well. I mean, a really, really good tool, but it's not the end all be all.
If I can
There's
chime
a place
in.
for all of us. Of course you can. You're the co-presenter.
So actually my experience when I was, before it was called big data, was data analytics. And many companies were, particularly in the online business, in the online industry, online first type of companies like we had at Match.com or Blockbuster Online. I was lucky to always have the analytics teams sitting in the same kind of adjacent cubicles. And there was always this back and forth between what people are doing. They were very aware that they were looking at behavioral data, transactions, and they were limited by the fact they didn't know why people were doing whatever they were doing. And so there was always this combination of we need to understand, and it could be surveys, it could be qualitative research. So it's if you really want a full comprehension of your customers, you need to do both. Because certainly with surveys, there are limitations about capturing data about actual behavior. People don't remember things. There are other factors that come in place. But if you have both teams working together, you got the best of both worlds. I've done a lot of market segmentation where we try to merge transactional data with survey data. And then when you develop those typing tools or those predictive models to see when new customers come in, where do they fall? And so transactional data becomes really very, very useful. But you need both. It's not either or. They're trying to, say that's what all you need, but now there's always in our industry people go to extremes in waves, and so for a while it was just we don't need humans, just let the machines do sentiment analysis. Now they come back and say, wait a minute, we need to train the machines, and so we need humans for the machine kind of understand. And so there's always and it depends who is trying to sell what. So be careful about technology vendors because they will have the spiel and try to convince you that you need this and nothing else.
Cool. Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, I think it's good to know kind of like where that line is in marketing research and the technology side of it, and being able to, lean on each other to kind of come up with a good solution. So thank you both.